Question: the forced expulsion of all the Jewish people from a specific area of a country was a potent sign of 19th century anti-Semitism in which country? And if you need a hint, remember that this isn't German Esoterica. Welcome to American Esoterica. If history class gives you the baking soda, this is the vinegar ready to be poured into the volcano. The essential stuff in between. The personalities, events, and other ephemera that shape our history and culture. I'm Brian Powers. There are plenty of uncomfortable moments of American history that we'd rather forget or wish away, such as the Trail of Tears, the internment of Japanese Americans during World War II, and, of course, the original sin of America, slavery. It was during the war over this last atrocity where one of the seemingly greatest leaders experienced a failure of an all too familiar sort. It began with the black market for Southern goods. One of the first acts taken in the Civil War was a blockade of all Southern products by the North. Creating this massive barrier to trade only served to increase the price of items such as cotton, which saw a threefold price increase. Thousands of profiteers and speculators poured into the Cotton Belt behind the Union Army as it captured territory throughout the South, buying up bales of cotton and turning it around for a quick and tidy profit, whether legal or not. Cotton planters, relieved to be able to unload the cotton after losing direct access to the markets, sold off everything they could. While the War Department was worried that the money would make its way into Confederate coffers, it hammered out a compromise whereby those with permits could purchase cotton so long as it was from within captured territory. As you might imagine, this rule was difficult at best to enforce, and it exacerbated the booming black market trade, which had already been built on the greased palms of Union officers looking the other way. The black market was a special headache for General Ulysses S. Grant, tasked with enforcing it in the Tennessee Department, a military district for which he was responsible that included parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Arkansas. Grant was frustrated by the slew of hangers-on that followed his army as it fought its way through Mississippi. He became doubly frustrated when his own father showed up with some of his friends, a prominent Jewish family out of Cincinnati, looking to curry Grant's favor to get a license to trade. For his assistance in hooking them up with Grant, Grant's father was going to get a 25% cut of the profits. Grant was furious that his own father would exploit him and his military position for personal gain, and he sent them all away with nothing to show for their efforts. Grant was angry with them all, which might have been the impetus behind what came next. Pernicious rumors were swirling, as they often did, that the black market in cotton was managed and prolonged by Jewish speculators. Grant bought the lie, and on December 17, 1862, he issued one of the most infamous orders of the Civil War, General Orders Number 11, which stated, "The Jews as a class, violating every regulation of trade established by the Treasury Department, and also department orders, are hereby expelled from the department 24 hours from the receipt of this order." In other words, all Jewish people were forced to leave Grant's territory or face military punishment, and they had literally one day to do it. Here's what made this order particularly egregious and, frankly, dumb. The Jewish population of both the Union and the Confederacy at the time was around 150,000, and only about 25,000 of those were in the South. Compare that with the total population of just the Confederacy at 9 million people, and it becomes much harder to believe that these folks existed in mass numbers enough to exert control over the entire profiteering market. Put another way, Grant somehow believed that a group of people who made up a little over 0.2% of the population were somehow so economically destructive that they had to be removed. The order immediately resulted in at least 30 Jewish families being forced from their homes in the city of Paducah, Kentucky alone. With no time to make arrangements or pack, they were forced to leave with only what they could carry, and 2 dying women had to be left behind with neighbors. One member of those families, Cesar Caskell, immediately set out for Washington. And there was no real thought to discerning who the real speculators were. Grant excluded an entire community based on rumors. He was lambasted in the papers, and the Jewish community bombarded every politician available. Caskell arrived in Washington and brought his outrage directly to President Lincoln, only 2 days after the Emancipation Proclamation had taken effect. It was obvious to everyone that Grant's order was a self-inflicted wound in the Union cause, a cause that saw Jewish soldiers fighting for it by the multitude. Immediately, as Lincoln learned of the order, he sent his own in return, ordering General Henry Halleck to order Grant to rescind his order, which he promptly did. By a stroke of luck, the order hadn't been widely disseminated, so less than 100 individuals were thought to have been affected out of potentially thousands. Still, however, the ugliness had reared its head and made national news, and it provided a foothold for anti-Semitic sentiment to spring forth. Public support for Grant's order could be found from Christian abolitionists to a reporter from the Associated Press. Still, more criticism flowed towards Grant and the order itself. The shame of the order followed Grant, and he allegedly admitted to his wife Julia that the criticism he received was well earned. She referred to the order as obnoxious. When he ran for president in 1868, the issue posed a conundrum for Jewish voters, to the point where a great debate was held between two distinguished rabbis. Would it be better to vote for Grant if his vision for the country matched theirs? Or would they be betraying their people and their faith by supporting someone who could issue General Orders No. 11 and so cast them from their homes? For the first time in American history, Jewish voters were in the spotlight. Grant won the election, and only when he had safely done so, permitted a letter he had written to a friend to be released to the press. The letter was an apology, somewhat, for the order, stating, "I do not pretend to sustain the order." His attempt to explain away the order as not really thinking he was banning a whole sect of folks was met with more than one set of rolled eyes, but he at least concluded with, "I have no prejudice against sect or race, but want each individual to be judged by his own merit." For 1868, this was pretty strong stuff, and it seemed to go a long way with the American Jewish community. Grant continued to atone for his misdeed. He appointed a great many Jewish officials throughout his tenure, probably more than all other prior presidents combined. When Russia and Romania expelled and persecuted Jews, Grant spoke out forcefully, even appointing a Jewish ambassador to Romania in response. A more cynical take from a contemporary political cartoonist shows Grant dressed as a crocodile and shedding crocodile tears for Russian Jews for the Jewish vote, all under a sign describing General Orders No. 11. He handily won re-election, though. He had managed to win over Jewish voters after all. His attempts at redemption included attending the dedication of a synagogue in Washington, D.C., coinciding with the country's centennial in 1876, the first American president to do so. He also made a conspicuous donation to the congregation, and when the Union of American Hebrew Congregations met in Washington a month later, he welcomed the leadership to the White House for a tour and meet and greet. So did Grant manage to redeem himself after General Orders No. 11? It was a pretty tall sin to overcome, and many of his later dealings had at least a small taint of the political about them. His hand at politics did seem to reset the national tone somewhat, but he never fully rose above his brief but marked descent into full-on anti-Semitism. When he died, the response from the Jewish community seemed to be one of, "Forgive, but maybe don't forget." The Philadelphia Jewish Record paper eulogized him thusly, "None will mourn his loss more sincerely than the Hebrew. And tomorrow, in every Jewish synagogue and temple in the land, the sad event will be solemnly commemorated with fitting eulogy and prayer." No matter how redemptive Grant's arc, no matter his later treatment of and attempts to elevate American Jews, there will always remain an asterisk next to his name that leads to the footnote, General Orders No. 11. This has been American Esoterica. All sounds were made by me, Brian Powers. Did I get it wrong? Did I get it right? Just want to talk about what the heck a military department is? Drop me a note. The address is yell@americanesoterica.com. More information on the show can be found at americanesoterica.com. Thank you for listening, and God bless America.